Okay, welcome everyone to the March 18th, 2026 meeting of the Community Preservation Committee, our first meeting of the year. Welcome 2026. Um, we will not be looking at any of the proposals tonight. Instead, we're sort of doing administrative stuff, including some application review process discussion, oh good, here's Lemmy. Everybody's here. Um, that is the main thing that we'll be focusing on. We have a few administrative details to get to before we do that. As always, we begin all of our meetings with general public comments. Sarah, are there other people to be let in?
There is no general public here.
There is no general public, thus there is no general public comment. Okay. Ch Moving right along to chair's report. I have just a few things. One is a reminder to all of us that Sarah's asked for if we have written feedback on any of the proposals, written questions that we want to be asked before we meet with the applicants, please get those to Sarah by the 23rd, which I think is Monday, next Monday. So that's just a few days. So if you've had a chance to look over the proposals and you have written questions that the applicants can answer, please get those to Sarah. I had a chance to represent us at the newest Habitat for Humanity construction that we funded last cycle. It was a Zoom meeting because the weather was so miserable. It's the Glendale Road one, or is it West Hampton Road? I can't remember. I thought it was on 66, but
Uh,
maybe
that one is West Hampton Road
West Hampton Road.
or 66.
So it was very nice. There were a number of different speakers, and Habitat and the new owner are always so appreciative of the work that we do. So it's always nice to hear such nice things said about us and our ability to provide funding that otherwise projects would not get done. So that's exciting. I think that project is close to being finished, Sarah. Am I
I,
right about
I
that?
I believe it is. That was on a pretty fast timeline. So they'd actually started construction before the CPA funds were awarded. So
And
that should
it's
be
a,
ready to occupy this
I
spring.
yeah.
I live across the street from that site, and they put it up. I think it took them 2 nights. They didn't do it overnight, but I think it took them no more than 2 nights. They really just they and talk about some bad weather. They were out there in just horrific weather putting it together.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive. Very cool. I also had the chance to go to the sort of what we call it farewell party for Kevin Lake, who was, you remember, was our CONSCOM person on this committee and was chair of the Conservation Commission forever. And he is retiring doing because of medical issues. And Sarah spoke very eloquently at that event, as did Kevin Lake. And one thing that Kevin said that really struck me as pertinent to this committee is he really, it was a very eloquent thank you to all of us and all of us who are on town committees and putting in our time and our expertise at no pay, uh, and depending on the committee, sometimes in duress. But just a thank you to, because this is how the city works. The city works by people like us putting ourselves out there in committees, and Kevin was very appreciative of that. It was very nice to hear a big thank you to all of us volunteers. So, from Kevin Lake, thank you to all of you for doing all of the good work that all of us do. Um, uh, we have Debin with us for the next 2 months. Debin, I hope I'm not spilling the beans here.
Not at
Um,
all.
and then Debin will be leaving us at the end of her term, which expires at the end of this round. And then there will be a new mayoral appointment because Debin is appointed by the mayor. So we won't say goodbye or farewell to Debin yet, but just knowing that's coming. Um, let's see, was there anything else? I think that is it for chair's report. Moving right on to the financial report that Sarah sent out maybe yesterday, something like that. Hopefully folks had a chance to look at it. Sarah, are you able to screen share and take us through that?
I think so. Let's see. So just a quick overview
Sarah,
of this.
Sarah, let me interrupt for one moment. I'm very sorry.
Sure.
There is after chair's report is the finance is the approval of minutes. I just bypassed that entirely. So my apologies. Let's go back and do the agenda. We have two sets of minutes to approve. The minutes of April 30th, 2025 and November 19th of 2025. So Sarah sent both those minutes out yesterday or a few days ago. So if we can deal with those two items. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of April 30th, 2025?
And just to note that Martha had provided just a couple typo corrections. I had her both making and seconding a motion. I corrected that, and I fixed an incomplete sentence.
Good. Martha, thank you as always for your wordsmithing, and that's much appreciated.
That was on the November 19th, wasn't it?
The motion issue
Yeah.
was, yeah, and then the incomplete sentence was on the 30th.
Thank you, Martha. Is there a motion to approve the April 30th, 2025 minutes?
And if you want to, you can do them at the same time.
Let's do them at the same time. April 30th and no, November 19th minutes.
So moved.
So moved.
That was Jeff and second by
I'll
Martha.
second it.
Is there any discussion of those minutes? Okay, hearing no discussion, Sarah?
Right, roll call vote since we are remote. Lemmy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Chris Tate,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Devin,
Yes.
Chris Hellman,
Yes.
Martha,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
All right, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are we caught up on minutes?
For the most part, I'll have some more for you next time, but
Okay,
we're doing pretty well.
getting there. Great. That would be good to get caught up. Okay, sorry, moving on to the financial report. Sarah, you are muted.
I muted myself instead of unmuting myself. Okay, so just a quick overview. So rundown is that we have basically the same amount in requests that are available for the remainder of the fiscal year. So there are 938,979 in applications, 927,272 in funds that are available. And because we're conservative in the estimates that we put together, there typically is a little bit of wiggle room plus the administrative amount that will be returned to the project expenditure availability at the end of the fiscal year. So should the committee want to fund everything in full, don't let that small discrepancy stop you. It will work out at the end of the fiscal year. And this includes everything that was funded round one and everything that has been applied for in round two. And 251,000 of that and change is in the historic reserve and is only available to be spent on historic projects.
Questions for Sarah? Everybody's good to go on the budget? Great. All right, are we moving along or what? So we do this every year. We elect a chair and a vice chair. And right, once a year, is that what we do? And I've forgotten how we do that. Sarah, do you
Well, I
pick?
nominate you.
I second that.
And then we vote him in.
I usually say some really nice things about your leadership style and what a pleasure it is to serve with you and ask you if you're willing to continue to chair.
Um, I thank you, Chris Hellman, and Jeff. I appreciate that. I love being the chair, and I'm happy to do it. I do not want anyone to dissuade anyone else from being chair. So if there's someone who would like to fill that role and have that opportunity, and it's an honor and an opportunity, I am happy to step down. So if someone would like to do that, please feel free. No one is leaping to that. We need a vice chair. Chris Hellman is our current vice chair.
I'd like to renominate Chris as vice chair, unless Chris does not want to perform in that role.
I'm happy to continue doing it, and unless there's somebody else who would like to have the opportunity.
Is there anybody else who would like to have the opportunity to be the vice chair? All right. Well, speaking for Chris and myself as your slate of candidates, we humbly thank you. We've been lobbying hard. It's been a long journey of shaking hands and working the town for this. Sarah, we have to take a vote. Is that correct?
Yeah, and did we have a second on the nomination for Chris
No.
Hillman?
I'll second it.
Second. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Sarah?
All right, so approval of Brian for chair and Chris for vice chair. Roll call. Lemmy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Chris Tate,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Devin,
Yes.
Chris Hellman,
Yes.
Martha,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the application review process. At the end of our last session, just a few days after our last meeting, Martha got back with some questions that had been on her mind, which we thought would be really useful for all of us to discuss. Sarah sent out those. So thank you, Martha, for thinking of those. And Martha, I don't know if you want to take us through these or you want me to introduce them. Maybe you can start if that's all right with you. So why you put that question out, and then we can just open it up for discussion with each question, I think. Unmute, Martha.
I don't actually have them in front of me, I'm sorry to say. So if you have them, Brian, why don't you start?
Okay, so Martha asked 4 questions, and I think I put in one more. And we'll start with the first one. At what point in the review process do we stop allowing applicants to revise proposals and or weigh in during the committee's final decision-making process? And I sensed a certain amount of frustration with that may have been directed at me or my facilitation with the pump track of allowing the presenters to continue to present really after longer than allotted time during the initial presentation. And then when we were sort of debating proposals, allowing them to weigh in. So I think maybe, Martha, that's what drove that, was that particular instance, but it's happened before. So again, at what process do we stop allowing applicants to revise proposals and or weigh in during our final decision-making process? Do people have comments on that?
Brian, you're too nice and you should have stopped the pump track folks. So I had Martha's same reaction there. But I do think if there is a financial change, they should be allowed to submit that through Sarah and make a change then. I mean, if something impacts the amount of money they're asking for and they know it, and then if we've got questions of them, then the questions could come from us rather than them making a presentation again.
Let me.
Jeff, are you trying to go before me? I was like,
Oh, go right ahead.
okay.
Go right ahead. I clicked the wrong button.
Okay. Yeah, Brian, I actually appreciated your facilitation on that. I think it is more welcoming to people who are doing it in a more like community way. Like a sort of like that's a very membership-based organization kind of coming forward rather than like, Habitat and like people who are used to doing these things in like a sort of machine way. But I do think your facilitation style could also welcome like a very clarity about, okay, we're going to take like revisions up until this point, like please hold any sort of revisions till the next meeting, or there's like once they present, they hear our feedback, they get one shot at like a revision when they come back when we're actually voting on it. I think part of a democratic process is like open feedback and incorporating it. I think the am ambitiousness or the sort of like jumping on the feedback is the problem, not necessarily giving them an opportunity to incorporate it. I think people like are kind of nervous and want to like respond and incorporate it right away. And I think that's what we could work on, is just kind of collecting it and giving it all, like telling them to not react so like in the moment, and have just a process.
Thank you, Lemmy. Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I mean, most of the time this doesn't happen. We go through pretty normal, but I would also add there was a different one of sorts. When we were discussing the Ruggles Center, that I was frustrated with that because it was extended over multiple meetings, and they just didn't seem to have their presentation together where that they were in agreement with one another, and so it got stretched out to 2 or 3 meetings to the point where I was just a little bit frustrated, trying to respond to some of the issues that we raised as a committee. So yeah, I mean, that pump track was probably the only one that really stretched out where they should have hit the timer, and it's like we're done for tonight, with public input, and we're going to deliberate amongst ourselves the rest of the meeting.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Jeff? Do
Sure.
you think with Ruggles, we should have said come back next cycle? It's not clear enough to us.
I thought we were close to that to that point, and I wanted to approve it, but I kept getting frustrated with their lack of clarification. And that was all about the parking lot and the handicap space relative to the rest of the project, and they didn't really seem to have that figured out.
Thanks, Jeff. Other comments about this issue?
No.
Paul?
Well, since I'm brand new to the process, it didn't strike me as odd because I had no historical context to compare it to. I think we may have shot ourselves in the foot a little bit by asking questions about the funding and changing how much we asked them to raise. And I think that may have taken them off guard a little bit. And so we gave them a chance to respond to that. And I don't know if that could have been a separate discussion at a future meeting, but it didn't bother me because I'm used to long meetings.
Thanks, Paul. Martha, you're the one that brought this question up. Is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess no, I think the reason that I was so stumped by this is I feel a real responsibility to protect the public investment in these projects, because it is taxpayer money. And so, when we're confronted with an application that I'm not confident that this is really going to work, or it's actually going to be carried through on, that's where I get stopped. And I think I felt that way about the Ruggles Center, as you probably remember clearly, but also about the pump track too, because there was so much. There was a lack of clarity about what the real product was going to be. We didn't really have the information, I don't think, that we needed. So I think that's where I get hung up. So I don't know how you actually define whether some things we have, whether we have enough information or not. Maybe for some of it, it's more, we would like more than others feel like they need. So that's I think the dilemma for me.
Chris Hellman?
Am I? Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah. So I think the first thing to raise is that some of us have been doing this for a little while now, and what we were able to do is identify two specific incidences where we felt the process didn't work as well as it might. But that's really two out of a lot, which says to me that overall we've done a pretty good job. That doesn't mean we shouldn't draw conclusions from those. And on the pump track, I guess I had in my mind, I thought better clarity about what they were proposing. I just thought that their presentation uh, took a disproportionate amount of time and might have been in some ways intimidating to others, particularly newcomers who would have felt, oh my God, I didn't do a good enough job. And I think the way to deal with that, if we feel it's necessary, is to put in our guidelines for presentation a not a hard, but a suggested limit of what a presentation ought to amount of time it ought to consume, particularly given the fact that in most cases we've already looked at it and we've had an opportunity to ask questions. On the Ruggles Center, I will have to say that that's one of the few processes which I actually found to be unpleasant. And I think that there were a lot of reasons for that, some of which, as Paul pointed out, our requests for additional financial information were of our own making. But I also think it was a poorly defined project, and one where maybe we should have considered just saying, look, you know what, we want to do this, but we're not comfortable. And I think that when one of our members raises what I consider to be reasonable substantive questions and doesn't get a response that they consider adequate, we that's the path we ought to take. And I actually, in retrospect, feel bad that I didn't express that at the time that it happened.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Tate, any comments?
Nope.
Julia?
I tend to agree with everything that's been said. I can actually think of other examples where we went back and forth a few times, grow food and their building, and having someone show up who actually didn't know enough to talk about the project when there were changes in the financial structure of how they were asking for things. And even going back further, it's happened. But what I appreciate most about the committee is that we take each project on its own and make those decisions. And I hope we continue to do that. I do think the pump track just was a time suck in their presentation.
Chris, has everyone had a chance to weigh in? I think so.
Well,
Chris Tate.
sorry, I will say one thing. I thought there were two different issues with the pump track. So just their initial presentation went on forever.
Yeah.
They had so much support, which is great, but it went on forever. But I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think here we're talking about maybe we ask them more questions and then that process gets extended and goes on longer through multiple meetings. So it's kind of two different things. And I think both kind of happen with the pump track. But I like Chris Hellman's idea about kind of having a guideline, most presentations are roughly 15 minutes. Try to fit your presentation into 15 minutes. It should not be an hour and a half presentation. But it's hard, on the planning board, if we see there's a lot of interest, we might say, public comment should be 2 or 3 minutes. And maybe we did that with the pump track. I don't even remember anymore. But I see kind of two issues here. So there's the initial presentation, but then there's the follow-up where we have questions and it kind of goes back and forth and drags out into multiple meetings.
Right.
Martha?
I think, and this may have been said, I had to go off the screen for a second, that I find it problematic when we've gotten through the whole process and we're at our last meeting to make our budget decisions. And then one of the applicants shows up with additional information, be it budgetary or otherwise. I think I don't think we should allow that from my point of view, because I think by the time we get to the point of dealing with money, we've given so much thought to everything. We've listened to all the public comment. We've reviewed the applications. In some cases, we've done site visits. I think at that point, we just need to make a monetary decision. And as I recall from last fall, that was a real that became a real issue because we were, being presented with a lot of other information, and so we have to kind of step back and rethink this. And it's just, I think if there's not, I think the information given needs to end before we get to the budget meeting. That's it.
Other comments? It seems like what I'm hearing is that we can be more assertive, one, with my facilitation, but two, as committee members, and saying, this, your time has been allocated appropriately, and now it's time for us to move on, and not to feel too bad about that. Lemmy makes a good point that we want to be as democratic as process and open as possible. But there is a limit to that, and if it exceeds that limit, then there is a certain amount of assertiveness that we as committee members can do. And if in fact they're coming on with last minute financial changes, we can just say, look, this is not something that we can consider at this time, and we're going to entertain a new proposal in the next session and not feel bad about that. I mean, if they're coming in with last minute major changes, and we can say, look, this is the process, and we're happy to revisit your proposal with this updated financial stuff. Does that make sense? And we can do that as a committee rather than, yeah, thumbs up on that.
Particularly because we had two funding rounds in a year. I mean, if we had to put them off for a year or a couple of years, like some funding agencies or entities would do, that's a different story. But we have two rounds, so there's a lot of opportunity and not a lot of time in between.
Martha's second question was, do we make time? Oh, hold on. So let's go back to what I think both Chris's were saying and I don't know, Sarah, when you've asked applicants to do their presentations, have you given them this 15 or 20-minute time frame? Sarah, did you hear that as a question to you?
Yeah, I always advise applicants to provide a brief PowerPoint or other type of presentation about that amount of time. But some applicants are just really excited to talk about their projects and to go over them.
I guess a follow-up is like this round we have 5 applicants. If we're giving them 15 minutes to present, and then we may have some questions, do we want to say, well, we're trying to limit some discussion, but we don't want to limit it too much. Do we want all 5 applicants to present in one meeting? Or is that something
Yeah, I mean, when I'm scheduling, I always sort of play it by ear by considering the types of applications, how long the presentations are anticipated to be, because I know it can be tough to break up just, 3 or 4 or 5 applications into 2 separate meetings. And the preference has historically been to try and do those all in one night, even if it might go a little bit later. When it starts getting into 6 or more applications, I will always break those up into meetings.
Do folks feel okay with 5 applicants in one evening, the way that I think we've scheduled this? Seeing yeses. Anyone not okay with that? No, seeing thumbs up. Paul?
I think that if you have a chance to read the proposals ahead of time and formulate your questions, it makes for a more efficient process, and it's possible to do up to 5 in one meeting.
Okay. Great. Martha?
And I think also, if that's the case, that say we have 5 and we know we have an hour and 45 minutes or something like that, Sarah, I think it would help if you could let these folks know that they've got a limited amount of time to talk, like give them a amount of time they need to keep their presentation to, and that will help keep us on track.
Okay,
And
and
that
I do that at the beginning of the round, but as the meeting approaches, maybe I'll send another reminder. Like this is how much you get to have. When we met in person, we used to try and schedule a set amount of time for every applicant, but that never worked because just by the nature of the application, the amount of money that was being requested, some of them required more time, and some of the presentations were very short, and it was fine to just consider them as presented. So that didn't really work either. So I'm open to suggestions, but it's always been a work in progress to try and figure out what works best.
Julia?
Yeah, another thought on not necessarily limiting by time, but it might be helpful to limit by the number of presenters. So another feature of the pump track, I think I lost count of how many presenters were, and I also started losing count of why each person felt, why there were so many different roles. So it's very helpful. I can get distracted. It's very helpful to say 2 presenters. I know, presenter 1, I hear their content, I write my notes, presenter 2. So for me, that was another issue with pump track. I did start getting lost, not just by time, but by the number of people talking.
Good point.
Pump track people, if you're listening, we do love you and we love your project. But we're sort of using you as a way to facilitate discussion. So
yeah, and I'll just say Parks and Rec is super excited about pump track. We are working on it. We're very happy to see that happening.
Lemmy.
Yeah, and one, I wonder sometimes if presenters know we've like read the proposals. Like I think sometimes it feels like they're just like presenting it as if we haven't read it. And so I know that's kind of like a hard thing because of course they want us to make sure they have all the information that they think is important. And the other thing is like it sounds like more community-based projects like could use some extra guidance for, I don't know. I just think about like all the community organizing I do, and like I would totally end up with 3%, 4 presenters. And like when you get a group of people in the community together to do a thing, it's messy, and it's always going to be messier than when you have paid people doing it. And so how can we like provide that scaffolding to people is sort of like on my mind, but I don't think it's like a simple answer. And I think Sarah, you do a great job at doing all this stuff. And in my mind, the fact that the pub trap people were as together as they were really impressive, given their like huge membership and all of that. So the fact that the proposal happened, that they got ARPA money, like all of that was really impressive. And yeah, I think just providing more like guidance, and also maybe even normalizing that like questions are part of the process, that questions don't mean that we're like against it, because I think sometimes that's how it's received by people who are less familiar with presenting, is like, oh, they have this problem, and then it kind of like ups the ante for no reason. And it's just that like questions are seeking understanding more than having like issues with the proposal. Maybe that needs to be also more explicitly said, because yeah, and can be intimidating coming up here. And like I think when questions are read as like combative, it goes haywire.
And I definitely do communicate that both when I send the written questions out to applicants and when I let applicants know about the schedule, but maybe just adding that to the community preservation plan would be helpful, and reiterating, these are committee members who are really careful about their jobs and are careful stewards of public funds, and questions do not mean that there's an issue with your proposal. They're just being diligent.
Cool. And I feel like I have to like draft apply just to see how your magic works. Like I would pretend to apply just so I can understand all the steps.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happened before where an applicant will call after the meeting and say, well, they asked a lot of questions. I feel like they're not going to fund it because they have concerns about it. And I've had to allay those fears. Like, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that. The board members are just being really, really careful in doing their due diligence.
Julia?
We can do our part by being more succinct in our conversations with the applicants too.
I just wanted to return to something that Chris said, which is about people feeling sometimes intimidated, maybe by our questions, possibly by sitting through other people's presentations. And in fact, in that last meeting where we had one lengthy presentation by an unnamed group, another person who presented that night told me later that they were intimidated because they didn't have a presentation similar to the longer one. They didn't bring tons of people with them. So I think another piece of this that we should consider as we're structuring our questions and the meeting and the time frame for each person is that we're also looking for the presenters to have some respect for each other and for the time that they really get our devoted attention, and we're paying attention to think about spending public monies. So, and again, Sarah, I know you give them a lot of this detail, but it's always worth repeating as people come into the meeting.
What is it? People need to hear things 9 times before it settles in their brain or something. So at least we can give it to them 2 or 3 times. Thanks. I think it's a really good discussion. It can be helpful for us in moving forward. Any other discussion on this first of Martha's questions?
I just want to say one other thing, following up on what Julia said, that when the applicants present to us, they may not be thinking they may be thinking this is the only opportunity to, sell this. But the fact is there's a whole public comment period that comes in the next meeting. I think that a lot of those multiple presenters, some of them could be shuffled to the public comment period as supporters of the project. And so that might be one suggestion, we could make to them up front, is that they limit it to 1 or 2 speakers, and then the rest can come and support when that meeting comes along.
Great. Okay, moving along to the second of Martha's questions. And I think these are all Martha's. Do we make time for applicants to speak during our review process? And I think we really got bogged down with this with the pump track. We had heard from them. We had heard from them a lot. The previous meeting, we had heard a lot of their supporters, and then we allowed, and it's the royal we. I think it was more I was allowing them to speak. So thoughts on that. Once we begin our review process, should we say, okay, it's committee members only? Devin, your head is going. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's true. It is our debate at that point. And I think they are excited to sell their project, and they think the more time they can get in front of us, the more likely it is that we'll hear them. But I think that we should do, we have our business to attend to at that point.
Thank you, Devin. Julia?
Yeah, I agree. This is the meeting that we have all the information in front of us. We have sent emails with additional questions. If we had questions before we got to this meeting, we should make sure that we've relayed them to Sarah so she can ask the applicants and bring the information back to us. And this is the time that's our discussion, that's our responsibility to the process. So I would agree with Devin.
Thanks, Julia. Chris Tate?
I think we just have to decide if we're going to take a hard line. Is it all or nothing? The pump track, I think we were deliberating about, can we give them less money? And then the question was, can you work if we give you less money? And that's kind of why we brought them back to discuss.
That's right.
So because we were kind of initiating, could you take whatever it was, 200,000 less, then it kind of makes sense that they would come back and talk and see if that was possible or not. But if it's just like full amount, or we don't fund it, come back next round, like we can do that too. I'm fine either way. But we as a committee have to decide, what we want to do, and maybe not try to engineer everyone's projects. Just it comes to us as it comes, and if we don't like it, we say no, come back next time, instead of trying to massage it for them. But I don't know if that's the kind of committee we want to be. And I'm happy to be either kind of committee. I can go either way.
Paul, you had something to say?
I would agree with Chris. I think that I would prefer to go the more complex route to sort of massage the proposals and make sure that everyone has questions answered. For example, with the pump track, I don't know if we gained additional new information or whether we just heard a lot of redundant information that kept getting repeated. And if we're getting a lot of redundant information, we should close off that line of presentation. But if we're asking for new information and we're getting it and it's helpful to our deliberation process, then I'm in favor of that. I'm just not sure about the timing, especially when we need to wrap up our deliberations.
Thanks, Paul. Julia?
Yeah, I just want to note that a common question we ask earlier in the process very often is, could you do this same project if we didn't fund it fully?
Mm.
And we do that with great regularity. And it was a funny thing that we got to the end and finally asked that of the pump track.
Yeah.
That's unusual. So I think we
Mm.
should also look at our own process. If that's going to be one of the questions, and this is, my part of why I think that meeting, we should have our questions answered. We should have our questions asked and answered. This is a meeting where we're going to make decisions.
Yep.
Jeff, any thoughts from you?
I generally support cutting off public comment after a point. I mean, we don't make these decisions in one or two meetings, and I think there's ample time for information, and I also, in the interest of self-preservation, I don't want to have these meetings go to midnight.
Yeah.
And if we had a complete open door policy, they would.
Yeah.
So I think at some point you ask for public input, and then at that point we need to deliberate. So I generally support what's already been said.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Let's see, who hasn't? Lemmy, have you spoken on this?
No, and sorry, my camera's off. My internet has been on and off, unstable. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to say.
Chris Hellman?
I think I just want to reiterate something Julia said earlier, which is that one of the things that I enjoy most about this committee is our ability to view each proposal independently, and I think that that works well for us. And that if we keep that in mind, and I think this is a good discussion because it reminds us that we have to, be reasonable about our expectations about what people are going to do. But I'm inclined to err on the side of generosity when it comes to the use of my time here. Maybe because I don't have enough to do in the real world, but I also believe that part of my function here is to make sure that everybody feels that they've been heard. So if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on that end. But I agree with everybody. I don't want to make that the rule, and I because we will be here for eternity. But I also think that the point Chris Tate made is good, and it segues, I think, into one of the other questions: is what kind of a committee do we want to be? Are we micromanagers, or are we overseers, or are we reviewers? And I think that's another conversation that we're going to enter. So I'll hold for that.
Okay, I think that this discussion is good, and I think it gives us talking points as we move forward, try to make the process better for us and more clear for applicants. The next question was how, and we've dealt with this a lot, and Chris Hellman just brought it up. How do we define micromanagement of projects, and how much do we micromanage? I think particularly with budgetary issues. And I think we've continued to have this discussion. Are we micromanaging? Should we micromanage? Do we? So the question: how do we define micromanagement of projects? Martha, that was the question, right? Um,
Yes, I think that came up. Well, I know that came up with the Ruggles Center. And I'll just say it. Had a lot of issues with the way that whole thing was put together. I think there were some serious technical problems with it. And so this is sort of related to one of the other questions is expertise. If you have one of us or more of us has expertise on a certain subject, how much do we use that? No, I realize like in that case, I'm just one person. So I can only offer what, the knowledge that I have, and people don't have to agree with me. But I guess, the term was thrown out there, and I would like to have some more clarity on that. Just, yeah, how do you define it? When are you getting too involved in the details? And again, I'm coming at a place where I feel like we have to invest the public investment. We have to protect the public investment, and I'm concerned about that. So that was my question.
thanks, Martha. Devin?
I'd just like to pick up on Martha's comment. I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, but in order to, a project I did in town with the Forbes stage took me through the entire bidding process that the city has to go through in central services. So I am bothered that in spending this money, I like to see multiple bids. I want them to know that they just didn't go to one person and say, what would you do this for? Because that's not getting a competitive bid. We ran into that with every one of the school playground stories, and I just feel like we should encourage, even if they don't tell us what the multiple bids are, I think that would be micromanaging, but to encourage people to get more than one bid so that they know there's some competition for the cost bid.
Sarah, can you clarify with us on the three bid issue? I mean, anything that we fund through the city has to have three bids, is that?
So if the CPC funds a city project like a playground or a building project where both the CPA funding, which is public, and the property is also public, that has to meet all of the procurement requirements of Massachusetts general law. So generally that's obtaining, depending on the cost of the project, either going out for a full sealed bid process if it's really big, or obtaining three quotes for a smaller project. If the CPC is funding work on private property, then those do not apply. So the DAR house, for example, could hire a contractor of their choosing and not be subject to those public procurement laws.
I didn't see any extra bids for the lead school playground.
Yeah, I mean, if so, in a process like that, they may have just reached out to a contractor that they know provides this equipment just to provide a basis for the application, and then go through the full bidding and contracting process once the funds are awarded. It generally doesn't make sense for a city entity to go through the full bidding process for a really big project if there's no funds on hand, because those bids are only good for a certain amount of time, and by the time the CPC funds were awarded, they basically be no good and they would have to start from scratch. But applicants should certainly be obtaining, a good cost estimate based on the level of work. If they're like the Lilly Library stair rail project this round, it's only $7,000. I know they just reached out to a few contractors. Some of them didn't even respond because the job was so small. So they're working with the information that they have. But a really big project should be presenting the CPC with enough information to know that this is an opinion of probable cost that makes sense. This is what the project is actually likely to cost and won't result in any overruns or other shortages.
Devin, is that helpful for you?
It is, but putting that evaluation at the end of the project, it's now a public number that those bidders know what the budget is available. I'd rather see it done up front, but I accept Sarah's answer. It's the central services process.
But I think, Sarah, you encourage multiple bids from even private projects, correct?
Yeah, the CPC plan is specific that the three bids should be requested wherever possible.
Okay, thank you.
Chris Hellman?
I think for me, I can differentiate, and it's not a solid line, but one that I recognize it when I talk about it. The difference between best practices and good accounting, and which has to do with my stewardship of my tax dollars, and then getting into an in-depth discussion about the hows and whys of a project about which I probably don't have the expertise to make a relevant comment. And for me, and I won't say that I haven't done that, but for me, if I'm smart about it, the way I answer those questions is by either approving or not approving the project. Does it make sense to me? Does it not make sense? Once I feel confident about where the money's coming from, where it's going, and is it going to be properly spent, then from a fiduciary standpoint, then the concepts of the program, that's where I think I don't belong. But this gets us to the other question about the expertise of the people on the committee. There are certainly times where, and I think this is why we have a broad range of people represented here and skills represented here. I defer to my colleagues who do that kind of work on a regular basis because they know it better than I do. And if somebody was going to ask me about the condition of a building, I would expect to have something relevant to say on that. So you know I I don't want to keep harping on this, but I think a lot of this we're just going to have to continue to address on a case by case basis with a set of sort of mental guidelines about how we want to approach it.
Jeff?
I think first of all, relative to what Devin brought up, it would be interesting to know on that Leeds project what the actual bid was. If indeed it went out to three people or I know three different bids relative to the number we were presented at the time we approved the project. That just for historical comparison reasons. And the other thing is, and I don't know if this is the place, but on the at least part of the micromanaging stuff is there has been a tendency the last couple of cycles for because of the economic situation that we're in relatively, that all too often there are some things that are getting presented that are basically better taken care of by the city of Northampton out of their funds instead of CPC funds. So at what point do we, draw the line, and is that really micromanaging, or is that basically, in my opinion, doing what this committee was set up to do, and that's deal with the areas that we're supposed to focus on and not get caught up in basic city maintenance projects. And I'll leave it there.
Lemmy?
Yeah, I think I agree with what people are saying, and I was previously had a question about like bids and whatever, but that's a technical question, so I'm gonna skip over it. But I guess I'm thinking about what happens if we don't use our knowledge, as a social worker and a therapist. Like, I know that there's this like idea that we're supposed to be this blank slate, and I know that that's fake, and I can work with the fact that that's fake. Like, we just can't be those things, and to try is kind of contrived, and also like I'm worried about what it means to not like bring your full like critical thinking self as it comes naturally into the committee, because I guess I've been thinking about like different groups that come in, and just the assumed, we kind of assume good intentions. We assume that they have done their due diligence, that they're thoughtful, and also like generally trying to spend money as best as possible. But like if we're not having a critical eye on that, naturally, then like bias could seep in around, oh, here's this reputable group versus this unreputable group. And so I think we should just be careful about like, I guess the term even micromanagement is confusing to me because I don't think this committee actually can fully micromanage a project. Like, I don't think we had like that's within our purview. And I think everything that I've seen means people are just like naturally thinking critically about it with genuinely. And I think trying to like modulate that starts to bring in like power stuff that I'm not fully comfortable with, because then it means that like, oh, for this project that has reputation, we're gonna not have as much scrutiny for then this other project that might not. So I think Martha, for example, I want your scrutiny full on as it is always in every project, because um I don't understand how we could then modulate it otherwise, and not it like more power imbalance is entered in my mind, because it means that like, I think about some of the groups that I'd love to see pursue CPC funding, and I'm worried about like, their lack of like gusto in the community, or I think about folks who work with unhoused folks or whatever, like, there's just like lots of different credibility issues that play, and I just want people to be as scrutinous as is genuine. I think doing anything else is not a good idea.
Thank you, Lemmy. Other folks want to weigh on this one? I'll make one comment, which is, and I'm thinking that I know I've been lax in the last few cycles of getting written questions out to applicants when Sarah asks for them. And maybe this is the opportunity to do not micromanagement, but ask some really specific questions that we might not need to ask. And they give written answers to us. So rather than taking the time during presentations and getting bogged down in the minutia of the projects, whether we call it micromanagement or not, doing whatever we want in terms of the written questions, I think is appropriate. Moving right along, and all of these are sort of related. Thank you, Martha. Martha asked, to what extent should we be scrutinizing project budget numbers, especially when we're asked to pay for a significant portion or all of a project? Martha, you want to lead us with your thinking on this one?
Yeah, I just my memory is that there have been several times, where we're being asked to pay a very good portion of a project that's multiple $100,000. And the budget numbers just seem very loose, and they're not very accurate. There's a lot of variability and ability. They're squishy, I guess is a good way to say it. And I guess that's my question too. Are we supposed to look at these and say, well, they're not really giving us enough information to know that that figure is right, or it doesn't add up, or there are things that seem to be missing for this budget. Does that matter? Or are we really just looking at a total, what seems reasonable, which seems, just a total number or a roughly total number? I guess that's the question I had.
Julia?
I don't have an answer to your question, but I have a question for Sarah that's related, which is, once we've funded a project, how much budget report do we simply provide the lump sum, or are they submitting figure by figure according to those budget lines? How much do they have to adhere to the budget that they submitted, or in the subsequent processes? Do they have to submit budget revisions when something happens, or do they have some freedom to take that larger sum we give them and spend it to achieve the desired goal?
Yeah, so CPA grants are all on a reimbursement basis. So we're never providing in any circumstance, any applicant, whether it's city, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's somebody else, they're never getting the lump sum upfront. So applicants are submitting invoices, they're signing under the pains and penalties of perjury that the work has been completed. according to what they're submitting. And then that is reviewed compared to the budget that they've provided. And the CPA plan is specific that, so I think it's called routine instances of budget reprogramming. So if an applicant says, well, I'd like to move, $1,000 from this line item to this line item, can I do that? That can be done on a staff basis, but other larger requests like, well, something unanticipated came up with our project, and instead of doing this thing, we'd like to do this thing. That comes to the committee, and it doesn't really happen very often. And most applicants are proceeding exactly as they're proposing in their budget with some minor variations. More typical is that money is unspent, or an applicant will have a shortfall and have to come up with the remainder of the funding from elsewhere. But any funds not spent on a project will come back to the CPA, even if there's other ways that an applicant could potentially use that. And that's a pretty common question that we get, like, hey, I have $10,000 left over. Can I use it for this? No, you can't. That needs to come back to the CPA.
I find that reassuring. Paul?
I think this conversation has helped me understand what kind of questions I need to be asking for this current round. And I think what I would be asking is, how did you get to these figures? Do you have a bare bones minimum? Do you have a desired medium level of funding? And do you have an ideal level of funding, so that we can understand what the parameters are? And then, when we go into the meetings, we should have answers to those questions. I think that would be very helpful to me.
Monday, March 23rd. Sarah wants those questions.
Yes. Yeah.
Martha?
I think that this came to my mind now that I'm giving this more thought around the pump track, because we were given an application that had a budget in it, but there was no final design for this project. They had an old drawing in there that did not reflect what they said it's being revised, but yet they've got this construction budget, and that's what we're being asked to fund. And so for me, looking at saying, well, this isn't really, these budget numbers don't match this design, or do they match this design, or is there going to be another design that you have to redo the budget for? So in this case, we're being asked to spend a lot of money on this, a really good percentage of the budget. We need to know, in my opinion, we need to know before we spend the money, we need to know what the design is going to be and whether the budget numbers match that. Otherwise, we're basically making a big contribution and hoping it works out. Now, it sounds like from what Julie's saying, it's working out, and that makes me feel a lot better about it. But I just think in the future, we need some more specifics. We can't be asked to be giving these multiple $1,000 grants to things that are just so vague, I guess. In this case, that seemed vague to me.
Other folks want to weigh in on this scrutinizing project budget numbers issue? I think the fourth question that Martha asked, we may have already dealt with, but let's do it anyway. To what extent should individual committee members' expertise, technical knowledge play a role in the proposal review? Well, I'll speak for myself. I rely very heavily on Julia for recreation stuff, Martha for historic preservation, and Jeff for housing, Paul for conservation stuff, and then the rest of us for our general expertise. So I would, I mean, if we're doing a historic project and Martha is against it, I'm not gonna vote for it. And same thing with other folks. I mean, I rely extensively on their expertise. Other folks want to weigh in on this? Chris?
I guess I just don't know that we need to be taking all the meeting time, though, talking about, every specific instance of something on a plan and, move this 5 feet that way and this other thing 5 feet the other way. Um, you know, part of these proposals, they have professionals doing design work, and we might not agree with what the professional is proposing, but they are professionals, and there is a building department and there is a planning department, and this stuff will kind of get looked at by other entities once we give them the money to proceed with their projects. So just in kind of in the interest of time, and that's kind of maybe the micromanaging part too. It's like we don't need to talk about the ins and outs of a site plan for an hour, you know, with a $14,000 ADA ramp in front of a building. It's just at some point just say yes or no, and if you don't like it, I guess vote against it. I don't know, but we have to, it has to stop at some point. We can't. I mean, I don't have all night to talk about, you know, every technical merit of a site plan. Where other things are, you know, okay, we'll restore some historic clothing for $80,000, and that goes right through, but we're going to talk about the ADA ramp for an hour for like $15,000. That's all. That's kind of how I feel about it. There's other professionals out there who will make this project happen once we say yes or no to the money. Like there are other processes in the city that happen besides us. We're not the final guardian of the design of these projects.
Lemmy?
Yeah, I guess like this sort of reliance on the process, right? Like we're like trusting which process. Do we trust the deliberation process to, you know, as full scrutiny, full unpacking everything? Because I think for the Ruggles Center, it was very illuminating for me. Like I found that conversation very important to me. And so I think there's a process question at play of like, can we call the question? Like it seems like there's like an issue that the committee can't call the question and then have a motion seconded. Like, because I think this is all going to be subjective. Whether or not the committee wants to consider all this technical knowledge or not is going to be subjective for each member. And so if we're unpacking technical knowledge, then we probably need a way to say, can I make a motion to move on, basically, right? Like, can we make a motion to end the technical conversation and move the conversation along so that we can actually vote on whether or not that technical information is relevant to our votes? Because for my vote for the Ruggles Center, it was very relevant. I hear Chris Tate saying financially the $14,000 was not like very significant, but for me, all that technical information, I don't want to vote for something that is claiming to be ADA accessible that actually won't. That was very, very important to me. So I think that's kind of what's coming to mind is, can we just call the question? Is there a way to call the question, vote on calling the question, moving us forward rather than trying to make a general rule as to like how we move forward generally and what information is important? If we feel like we're getting in the weeds, we can just say motion to move on, or motion, can we make a motion to move to the next agenda item or the next, you know, applicant? Or I don't know if there's a way we could just call the question and vote on it in the moment so we could debate it on that case by case basis, because I think Robert Rules is built for stuff like this.
I think it's a valuable tool that we all have in our toolbox, is ability to do that. So thank you for reminding us of that. Other folks want to weigh in on this stuff? Chris Hellman, you've been quiet for a little bit.
Isn't that a blessing? I I just want to say as we wrap this up, and this is more a general comment, that this has been, we didn't come to resolution on a lot of things with specific recommendations, but for me, it's been a very useful conversation to help me target my thinking on how I want to approach these things as we move forward. And with that in mind, I hope I plan to, and I hope my colleagues will feel comfortable in future rounds to say, let's spend an hour tonight talking about the way we're doing things, and just open ourselves up to the possibility of future general conversations like this to help us refocus how we're working on things, because I think we're always going to be a work in progress, and it never hurts to have this kind of input from the other people on the committee for me to do my job better.
And again, a shout out to Martha for prompting this discussion. Jeff?
I would just follow on what you started out with, Brian, on this last question, is that I've been on this committee for a while. I have learned a wealth of information from being on this committee from my fellow committee members. And a lot of it is information that on my own I would have never come across and never understood. So I think that's one of the things that makes this committee so strong, is that we're kind of spread out over multiple areas. And I pretty much come away from every single meeting is like, well, I learned a few new things tonight. And I just feel that much better for having learned it. And I say this from time to time, but this has been one of the most enjoyable committees or boards I've ever been on, because of the diversity and where people are coming from with their own experiences and how it's applied to this process, which is imperfect. Everything is imperfect, but yeah, I think this discussion is just more proof of that point. So I very much appreciate it, and thank Martha for raising these questions.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Other comments? There was one more question that I added on to Martha's four, which was about the shopping cart process. And we've sort of gone with that for the last multiple cycles, I think. And I guess I would like to hear, is that working for people? Where we put things into the shopping cart and then we revisit it again. I see a thumbs up from Devin, thumbs up from Lemmy, thumbs up, Jeff. Okay, Chris Tate was that a thumb up or
No, yeah, I don't know. I felt like last time the shopping cart process, we deliberated, we put things in, but then we talked about them all over again when we were taking them out to check them out. And I thought the shopping cart was like, once they're in, then we can just say, okay, buy everything in the cart blanche. Like, it got in the cart, so we agree on it. And I felt like then we voted to put it in the cart, but then we voted on each one individually again to take it out of the cart. So I felt like there was no cart. Anything. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but I thought like putting it in the basket meant that we've all agreed that it's a thing that we can check out without further deliberation.
Chris Hellman?
I have not seen it that way in the past. The way I view it is the placing of an object in the cart means I haven't fully made up my mind on exactly how this is going to look when we get to the end of it, but its intent, purpose, and funding levels are in a range where I'm comfortable enough that I want to move forward. And the further discussion that happens amongst the other objects as we put each one into the cart helps me clarify where each one is relative to the others. So while I may be thinking 80,000 is right the first time I talk about it, once I see what I'm going to do on the other things, then I decide that it's not going to be 80, it's going to be 75. So I like the two-tiered approach.
Well, and it has the advantage of you don't know everything that's going to go into the cart. And so you have to price out the cart before you can actually be sure that you can do that. So the pricing factor of the entire cart is what matters to me at that point.
Paul, you were.
I would agree with what Chris said, because once every item that gets into the cart, because it's passed inspection, it allows you then to reassess the relative value of each of those items relative to the other items. And you may want to shift some of the priorities and the degree of funding for each one. It's kind of like a professor who has 30 papers to grade, reads them all through, doesn't grade them, and then once he gets a sense of the totality of them, then goes back and grades them.
That's helpful for me. I guess I was thinking it was kind of like it's in the cart, and then if you know
Done.
what your budget is, then you can't put that last thing in the cart because it doesn't fit your budget. So you'd have to take something out of the cart to put that last thing in the cart. But at the end of the day, you just say buy. Like, I guess I'm thinking more of like on Amazon than I am in a shopping cart. But I understand what everyone's saying, and that's helpful to hear that perspective. So thank you very much.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that shopping cart issue? Martha, Martha? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I always looked at it as sort of like a first cut, or you know, when you're viewing applications. And in a time I've been on this committee, which is a number of years now, we've always used this, I think. And there haven't been that many applications that didn't end in the cart, but there have been some. But it's sort of a way of, you know, pulling out the ones that you want to fund. And then once they're in there, you have a certain amount of money, and you have to figure out whether you can shave some of the awards,
Yes.
and get it within the budget, I
Right.
guess.
Yep.
So it kind of, I mean, I hate to use the word or the term weed out, because everyone's applications are worth something, but yeah, it just gives us a first cut. And
It's
the other thing
getting-
I like about it is we can vote on the cart and not individual applications. So that's more efficient.
Maybe that's what I was reacting to, because I felt like last round we didn't vote on the cart. We still voted on each individual application. And it kind of took away from the point of having the cart, because we were comfortable with everything in the cart, but then we went through and voted on each one. And then on a couple of them, there were like counter motions to like not vote on them or vote on them in different levels or something. And then so I don't know.
And I think
I just thought it could have been more efficient in some way. That's all.
So, Chris,
And I
do you
think-
think that that's like a systemic slash procedural issue, or more a reflection of the specific items that we were dealing with during the last round?
I don't know. I just think I thought it was like 10 o'clock at night and I wanted the meeting to be over, and I just wanted to vote on one thing and not on 7 different things that then could be amended to look at them a different way. So it was probably I was just tired, is what it was.
Sarah, can we vote on the whole shopping cart, or do we have to go project by project?
So it's gone both ways in the past, and the committee's always reserved the right to pull out individual applications, and that's been particularly important when a member was going to vote against something. So I don't want this recognized as a unanimous vote. I'd like to pull this one out separately to be able to voice some dissent about it. And I think the last round it happened more because there were projects that were a whole bunch of projects were put into the shopping cart, most of them, and then there were some that the committee wanted to discuss in more detail. So it may have seemed a little bit more cloudy last round than it has previously.
I think also what made things a little more challenging last time was to bond or not to bond. So we had everything in the cart.
Yes.
Like, oh, if we do this, we're not going to have any money for this cycle. So then we had revisited stuff with that bonding issue. Devin?
Right.
It does offer a member on the committee an opportunity to abstain, which occasionally needs to happen.
Wait. Chris Tate?
Could I make a suggestion that we only put unanimous votes in the cart, or we have a special bonus cart that has unanimous votes in it, but then we can just check all those out? Because there were plenty of projects that everyone supported at the dollar level, but then we still parsed it all out separately. So I don't know. I obviously have efficiency problems, and I own that. So I'll take my whatever behavioral issues I have with efficiency, I'll own those. So maybe it's just that. But
It's like a waiting list, really. You have the applicants to get in the first round, and then there's a waiting list.
Let me, as a therapist, you may want to deal with Chris's issues outside of this meeting. We won't take that time.
I just think if there's like
Chris Tate,
abstention,
Lemmy, Chris Tate.
you bond it or these sorts of things, then it doesn't go in the cart. Like it's not resolved. I don't know, but I'm fine with we just put it in the cart, but then we still go through the whole process a second time. I'm okay with that. I understand.
And maybe we can really scrutinize our process this next time and see what I mean, I think one of the problems when we discuss how the round went is we're doing it at the end of the evening when we're all exhausted and we're just like, it was fine, oh, it's great, whatever, because everybody wants to get done with the meeting. So I don't know if there's a additional time that we can weigh in. And I really appreciated Martha coming up very soon after the last meeting with there questions that were a reflection on what the process was afterwards. And maybe and then we have this, what I think is a very rich discussion tonight. So maybe that's the way to do it. Again, Lemmy.
Yeah, I wonder if we want to make just like a list of like efficiency motions, like motion to end the presentation, motion to end questions of applicants, motion to, we could just like have a list of ones like if people feel like it's dragging, we could just have like a cheat sheet of motions to make that are normal, not like combative. Like, yeah, motion to end questions of applicants would be one because I know we have unlimited questions of applicants, and I know I can find myself indulgent of my own questions. So that would be my official like next step recommendation based on this conversation, is just like having a cheat sheet of motions that are normal to make, that aren't seen as combative or hurtful to members just for the sake of when people are feeling like things are dragging.
And do you see Sarah doing a roll call after each one of those?
Well, no, it's just a cheat sheet. So it's like we can make the motion and then second. And I don't know if a roll call is necessary for like.
Yeah, so as long as we're meeting remotely, the roll call is necessary to move forward with anything.
Okay, can there be chair discretion? Like, could be a motion, could it be a motion to chair discretion? Like, could you petition the chair to use the discretion to end the conversation, right? Like,
If we, yeah, I mean, potentially we could do that, yeah.
Or in Robert's rules, I mean, we're not a Robert's Rules committee, but in Robert's rules, you can make a point of order. Point of order, can we end questioning? Point of order, right? If you just use the words point of order, it's consistent.
yeah, like motion for the chair to consider ending questioning, motion for the chair to, we could just add the chair's discretion in there. And then the chair can use his discretion. And if he feels like a roll call is necessary, then a roll call could be necessary.
Yeah, don't make the motion. Just make it a point of order. Point of order, chair, can we end questioning? If you make it the motion, you have to do the roll call.
Yeah.
Well, what if I disagree with your point of order? What's my mechanism for recourse?
Point me out. I don't know.
An additional
This
point
is-
of order.
Right. I mean, this is the hard part of, and I think it's one reason that we don't really strictly use Robert's rules, because if you go by Robert's rules, it starts to become, point of order and motion on a motion. And
Yes.
I really appreciate that we run a congenial meeting. So I'm all for a congenial meeting and kicking someone under the table. We just need that table to kick under.
Other comments, questions, motions? I think this has been a very rich discussion. And again, thanks to Martha for formulating most of the questions. And we are always a work in progress here, and always trying to make ourselves better and do right for the city and for our constituents. So appreciate everybody taking the time to think so deeply as we have. And we'll see how this next round goes, right? Moving right along to site visit scheduling. So we have 5 projects. Sarah and I were talking earlier today that maybe 4 of them, or at least 3 of them, warrant the possibility of site visits. I think a number of people have never been or may have never been to the Coolidge Museum on the second floor of Thorns, that might be useful to see what they have in mind. The Lilly Library stairs, maybe we can look at that ourselves, but it might be useful to have someone there for that. Sarah felt that the Northern Avenue Trail connection design, people can just drive to the end of Northern Avenue and take a look at that themselves, I think. The National Walnut Brook restoration, boy, that would lend itself to a marvelous walk that Sarah could lead folks on who were able or willing or wanted to do that. And then the Parsons House restoration phase two. I think some of us have been in the Parsons House, but it's closed to the public. But I'm sure um, that Lori or Betty would open that up for us. Uh, so really, I'm looking at the possibility of four: Coolidge, Lilly, Nashwanik, and Parsons House. Would people be interested in Sarah trying to work with us to find a time for those?
Yes.
Paul, yes. Devin, yes. Martha, yes. Okay, so that's enough. Sarah, can we leave it to you to try to do a little Google
Yes, definitely.
asking?
But just for a general start to my scheduling, what times of day and days of the week are people either not available or always available and would prefer?
Just no Wednesdays for me.
Anybody else with preferable times? Wednesdays are out.
And like business hours, after business hours. Thankfully, the sun does not set at like
Yeah.
3:30 anymore, so we can go after work, and that's totally fine, I think, for most applicants. But I just need to know what works best for most folks.
Late afternoon, is that better for most people?
That
I'm
works.
seeing nodding heads.
After business hour, I wouldn't be able to make it past like five. Like five, I'm done, so I have to be.
Okay,
So
early-ish.
before, so like 2, 3-ish.
Mhm.
Great. You can
Okay.
poll us on that, Sarah.
All righty, that sounds
That would be
good.
great. Good. So that is site visits. Other business not foreseen when the agenda was published.
Brian, Debin here. I'd just like to say I was disappointed we didn't get any small grants.
Sarah and I were talking
Maybe
about the
we need
same
to
thing.
talk those up.
I tried to get the word out there as much as possible.
Oh, I'm not, no,
Maybe
Sarah.
just people didn't have anything in the queue, or I know it's really hit or miss sometimes.
no,
especially
Did
it's
we
with
not
vote
you.
to raise it to 10,000?
Yeah,
So we raised it to 5,000. CPA asked for a $10,000 total project cost.
Oh, okay. And what was Lilly Library?
It was set like 7.
But it's so it's, but
7,
it's asking
6.
for all 7 from us.
Yeah.
Yes, 100. That's the only one with
So that
100%
qualifies.
coming from us. Yeah.
Thanks.
So Devin, Sarah and I did have the discussion and did express some frustration at not, but
well, and I wasn't wanting to lay it at Sarah's feet. I was wanting to get the rest of us to talk it up.
Mm.
great.
I will say I got one person to apply, but it was not eligible. So yeah, that was
But even if an applicant or a potential applicant reaches out, sometimes it starts a discussion about other potential funding sources, and it's never wasted time for anybody.
totally. So yeah, I just was like, try it. And I think even if you think, yeah, that's how I talked it up. And I hope they find something that is eligible with that project.
And there was actually, Sarah received, I think, 5 or 6 additional projects of which were not eligible. Maybe it was 5. A couple churches, Unitarian Church, First Church, a couple of collection stuff that didn't fit in. Playground one, right, Sarah? A housing one.
The playground one didn't submit. The housing application was not eligible because of what was it? The new, so it couldn't be, the CPA funding was proposed to be used for acquisition of a site, and there would be no city involvement beyond that. So that is clearly not eligible under the CPA law, which the applicant totally understood and had just forgotten about. And then a few historic preservation potential applications that sounded like just really great projects, but due to the strict constraints of the CPA were not eligible. So CPA defines historic preservation as preservation of historic artifacts or records or other items. So creating so like doing uh, like recording someone talking about their experiences is creating a historic document, and that's not eligible under the CPA, although it's a great project. And digitizing records is also clearly not eligible under the CPA.
Interesting.
Great. Any other business not foreseen? Martha?
I just had a question about the Mainsfield project. I just wondered where that was, because I thought that they were finishing up their report and there was going to be a public engagement process to look at design work for the park. And I just wondered where that was. Did that get completed or?
Yeah, Julia might have the most up-to-date info on that, but I know the Recreation Department was looking to schedule that public engagement session early this spring.
So the study of the watershed is done.
I believe it is, yes.
It is,
We
yeah.
haven't- Okay.
Yeah, the watershed study's done. It's actually been shared with DPW and with some other groups that are interested in looking at it. It was pretty, it's really fascinating for the implications, not just for the park, but for that whole area and what we learned. And all the planning, we just reviewed some of the plans for the public engagement process that's going to happen this spring. So it is on. And once that report is finalized, I did ask that it get actually sent out because this committee was particularly interested in seeing that come to an endpoint, that it gets sent out for folks.
Great. Thanks, Julia.
Any other business? So our next meeting is, get this, April Fool's Day with a full moon. Ooh. This is when we hear from applicants. 2 weeks later, on the 15th of April, is when we have public comments. And then the 29th of April is us maybe making decisions on all 5 of the proposals. Have a wonderful beginning of spring. Spring starts Saturday. Yay. And we'll see you in April. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.